My name is Ekow Yankah. I'm the Thomas M. Cooley Professor of Law with an appointment in the philosophy department here at Michigan Law. It's pretty special. It's pretty great. I mean, there are weird moments. There are moments, somebody told me a great joke. Going back to your campus is like going someplace that's haunted and realizing you're the ghost. There are moments when you're wandering around and you can't believe it. You see your roommate from your first year of undergrad walk by, and you see a version of your first date, and then you see, oh my goodness, there I go. And so you see these things replicated over and over, and you see how much the campus has both changed and how much it stayed the same. All those things are striking and remarkable and wonderful. And then some moments are just magical. Some moments where you walk through the diag and the lights are going low, and you remember when you were trudging with your first exams, when you were wrestling with your major, and now to know that you're on the other side of the desk, they're just moments that are really special. I think, quite unfortunately, I was born a lawyer. It's probably a deep character flaw. I had a nice experience years, I think it was when I was leaving high school or maybe even college. It was when I was leaving college. My elementary school had us all write letters about what we wanted to do in the future. And somehow they kept a system where they mailed me this letter years later. So here was childhood me speaking to me. And I'd said something like, I've gone to college, I studied something, I don't quite remember, but I said something along the lines of, and now I'm heading to law school. And it was true. It was true. So when I came here, actually, I studied by studying the hard sciences. I was doing chemistry. Had thoughts of microbiology, even astrochemistry. But I always thought maybe biomedical ethics, maybe something policy related. Those things were always a bit of a wrestle in my mind. And the further I got into the hard sciences, I realized as much as I liked them, I didn't have the love for them that I had for the big questions about how to apply them. And so at some point I was visiting my advisor, who I'd only seen the one time, frankly, as an undergraduate. And he said, well, you're taking all these humanities classes. Oh, what's going on? And I said, oh, those aren't my serious classes. Those are my fun classes. And he said, maybe you ought to repeat that sentence to yourself one more time. And I realized, oh, he has a point. So I knew that it was the way I love the thinking about how to apply those things, the why, the how we're going to govern ourselves with scientific advancement that was even more interesting to me than being in a lab. So I went to law school. I teach tort law, which is the law of civil injuries or accidents, right? So, for example, if you and I get really frustrated about this filming and you finally have had it with me, you hit me over the head with the pad you're holding, or worse yet, the chair. Of course, it's true that the police are going to come talk to you. You're going to have some real questions about criminal behavior. It's also true that somebody has to pay my medical bills for the battery, for the injury, and that's tort law. Related to that, I teach what happens when the police want to come talk to you. I teach criminal law. So what does it mean that you hurt me? Did you do it on accident or on purpose? Did you premeditate it? What does it mean if you hurt me accidentally while you're committing a felony? All those kind of questions are first year substantive criminal law. Then I teach criminal procedure, which is the law of policing. Criminal procedure is often broken into two parts. What we call investigations versus adjudications. Teasingly, we call them cops and robbers and jail to bail. And I teach cops and robbers. When can the police stop you? When can they search you? When can they arrest you? And yes, when can they kill you? So those are my portfolio of doctrinal classes. And then my seminar class is a philosophy class, legal, moral, and political philosophy. And those are the areas in which I write. And that's also just a delightful class. That can take all sorts of shapes where we ask all the big questions. What is a life well lived? What rights do we have? How are we obligated to each other? How does our view of the power of men dominating the law affect our obligations? How does race interact with the law and our obligations? Just about every important question you can ask is a question that's at home in my jurisprudence class. In some ways, the subject matter of law, how we govern ourselves, many of the problems we face, some of these problems are eternal. And so some of these problems have a structure and a demand on us that are no different than they were even 150 years ago. But some of them have changed. Some of the things that society demands of us, some of the questions that we put to it. I think, for example, my policing class, race and its effect on policing is obviously nothing new. It's as old as the American history. But the way it's become in the public eye, the conversations we have about it, the way in which there are demands of racial justice have changed in the last 30 years. And those are things that you cannot teach a class now without tackling. But other things have changed. The technology that the police can use, the way we can survey each other, the way the police can survey us, the way we can track literally every American who has a cell phone throughout the country at all times. These present new and really pressing questions that aren't the same as they were 30 years ago. And students want to know how we're going to tackle not just the problems of today, but the problems of tomorrow. The doctrine of felony murder says if somebody is accidentally killed while you're committing a felony, you can be responsible and held liable as a murderer. It's constrained by which felonies, often dangerous felonies, but that's the structure of it. And there are some cases where it might make sense, and we discuss what could be said in its favor. The problem, so for example, if I go and I open fire in a bank robbery and a bullet ricochets and kills somebody accidentally, you might think, well, that's a level of recklessness that deserves our condemnation as a murder. So too, it might be true if I open fire during a gunfight and the police return fire, then we have a real question. Well, the bullet came from the police officer's gun, but you're the one who opened fire. And the question is felony murder the best way to describe that murder? But what happens if I'm committing a felony and a police officer, so I'm committing a felony like a snatch and grab, right? So it's a felony. It's a very unhappy thing to do, and there's some level of danger, but it's not something where I'm putting somebody's life at risk. A police officer sees me and opens fire, right? Opens fire, which might itself be a Fourth Amendment violation, but let's put that to the side. And the police officer's bullet hits another person. Well, now somebody's been accidentally killed, but it looks very different than the case where I opened fire on the police and they return fire. It looks like this police officer's reckless behavior is what's causing the death, right? Turns out there are legions of cases that are like this, where police officers' actions are reckless, dangerous, and unsubstantiated, but we never really get to inspect it. Why? Because the police and the prosecutor can use the felony murder doctrine to describe the person who's committing the crime as the murderer, and thus the police action goes uninspected. So for example, if the police are racing to capture somebody who's committed a crime, but the police engage in egregious driving behavior, spin out of control and kill an innocent civilian, they're considered, they can use the felony murder doctrine to pin it, so to speak, on the felon. And one of the worries about the way this doctrine works that we've seen in particular is the way that it's used along racial lines. That is to say that police killings, often of black suspects that deserve inspection, the kind that we have now often videotaped and realized are egregious police tactics, violations of their oath to us, get washed away because rather than the police officer's actions being inspected, the prosecutor blames a co-felon as the murderer. In one famous case, though not quite on the same racial lines, a very young boy was committing a gas station robbery. Nobody's confused. This is egregious and dangerous behavior. He takes a gun into a gas station and threatens people. He's quite hapless at it, but nobody's making excuses for that. He's surrounded by the police, and he's so hapless that, frankly, he locks himself in the gas station, and the police are laughing at him. He comes out, he puts the gun down, the police start shouting orders at him, and so he flinches. He doesn't reach for anything, he just flinches, and the police open fire on him, killing him. His co-felon had run out of the back of the gas station long before any of this happened, but the prosecutors did not look at the police action. At first, they charged his co-felon with felony murder. And we've seen this with other chases, in particular when black suspects have been gunned down by the police or police tactics have made things vastly more dangerous than they need to be. And prosecutors, frankly, hide this police behavior behind the felony murder doctrine. And so that's what that article explores. One of the problems with my advice is that often it pushes and pulls in opposite directions. And I suppose that's just the nature of things. It's been true since Aristotle taught us to govern between two extremes. So I'm going to give two bits of advice that seem to tug in opposite directions, but I think they do complement each other. The one is, if you treat law school like a job, you have a great chance of success. That is to say, if you're waking up, putting your effort in, putting in time, scheduling your time and structuring your time, right? A lot of the students who come here have been very successful and frankly are very talented, and they were able to kind of catch as catch can. Not everybody, but some. If you approach it with the kind of sobriety that says, if I put in 8-10 hours a day, I can still live my life, I can still go to the gym, I can still see my friends. I'm not just scrambling at the end of the semester. I'm not taxing myself in ways that make it a crisis all the time. If you put in the work, the advice I wish I would have gotten when I was 1L is organize yourself, treat it like a job, be steady, and you'll find that it's not an impossible demand. But the second bit of advice cuts the opposite way. It's not just a job. Try to enjoy it. You have 3 years to study this material in a way that's deeper than you will ever do again unless you go on to do more graduate work, or unless we're lucky enough to have you join us on the other side of the desk.